Hey, sports fans, I'm Lendon Wilson, and welcome to the Goal Podcast. Well, hello, and welcome to the Goal Podcast. I am Lendon Wilson, and I am the host of the Goal Podcast. This is a podcast where we talk about the journey through our sports, what it's taught us, what it's led us to in life, the people that made the biggest impact. And I am excited today to have a longtime friend as one of our very first, and his name is Lance Gasaway. He's a proud owner of the winning horse of the 2024 Kentucky Derby, a victory that's firmly established his name in the elite world of thoroughbred racing. But before that iconic moment, under the Twin Spires, Lance was making moves of a different kind on the turf, a college football player at the University of Arkansas. So from gridiron grit to derby dominance, Lance brings a rare perspective on discipline, pressure, and legacy. And we're going to find out about Lance's story today. So I want everybody to welcome in Lance Gasaway. What's going on, my friend?
Not much, buddy. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm super excited to have you on here. Even more excited to get to catch up after all these years. You know, when you sit and watch people on social media, you feel like you know what's going on in their life. It's good that we can stay connected that way, but to be able to sit and talk to you again after, I'm not going to tell everybody how many years, but they can look at your hair and my hair and tell it's been a while.
What little bit I got left?
Well, I don't have much left either, so I went ahead and cut mine off, but it's getting gray. So Lance, I want to thank you for taking time to come on today. What we're going to talk about is how you got started in sports, how that mid-tier in the middle of your life with sports, your high school, your college, anything after that. And then we're going to talk about all the lessons that you learned maybe during that time you didn't realize, and all the people that impacted you along the way, and how that leads you today in your professional life. So first question that I want to throw at you is, tell everybody where you grew up and what was life like for Lance Gasaway as a kid.
So I grew up in a little small community called Gould, Arkansas. We're in southeast Arkansas. My dad was a farmer. My mother was a school teacher. And it was a nice little community. I think we had 1,500 people population. My two cousins, their family were my dad's brothers, and also my cousins lived there. And, we had a lot of young kids that we'd get together, and kind of remind me a lot of the Sandlot. I mean, literally you had some young kids our age, and we'd all get together and we'd play football every day or basketball, whatever season it was. And then other than that, our dad had us working in the fields.
Right.
So it was a good childhood, really was.
It's different back in those days than it is in childhood now, right? Because as you mentioned before, limited some of your sports opportunities because you did work and had responsibilities on the farm and everything like that. So what was the very first sport that you remember playing?
It was football. I can remember out in the yard, my dad was a big sports fan. So, every Sunday we sit down and watch the Cowboys play. That was always my favorite team. Of course, that's about all back then. We didn't have all this direct TV and all. You had 4, 7, 11, 3 channels. So you had to watch the Cowboys is pretty much what you was going to watch.
Right.
So we all, so we'd watch football, and then, we'd go out and try to emulate it just like every young kid. That's the first game that I ever played. And then, as an organization, even as a team, where I went to school at Star City because my mother was a teacher, and that's where her job was. So we drove 18 miles every day back and forth to school. And at Star City, they didn't even start the Pee Wee football. Like nowadays, I think they start them 3 or 4 years old. But back then, you was in the 5th or 6th grade before you played in pads any kind of football. So, it was 10, 11 years old.
First time I ever played was 7th grade. I mean, that's all we had.
That's the way. Well, at Star City, we did start. I think it was the 6th grade, and they had a Pee Wee team, and then 6th and 7th, and then at 8th you started in junior high. So that's the way we was. That was my first organized football.
Well, I think like a lot of people, you just mentioned that your dad was a sports fan. I think most of our dads probably, if they were into sports, got us into sports. So did it take you a while to really fall in love with the game of football, or was it just something that was, do you just not even remember the day you realized you loved it?
So once again, was in a small community. There wasn't a whole lot to do, around our little towns. We had a little community swimming pool. People go to the swimming pool, but then you play sports or you go home. That's all you do. But back then, there wasn't video games and all that stuff. We stayed outside until our parents would holler, "You better come eat or you're not going to get dinner," But the game, I just fell in love with the game. And then we played, my parents were always good about any kind of competition. I was probably competitive to a point of it was bad. All right. I mean, Byron and Brandon. So you remember Byron and Brandon?
Oh yeah.
They're 2 years older than me. And, I looked up to them, and then my brother was a year older than me. And Lendon, all three of them, and my size. Well, I'm a runt.
Up against those, both of us are. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Byron and Brandon were 6'1", 6'2", and 200 pounds. My brother was 6'2", 300 pounds. And here I am, 5'10", 170 pounds. So I'm trying to compete against them, which I'm not going to let them push me around, and honestly, that's what I think. That's one of the big factors that made me the player I was, because I was so competitive, and them pushing me and me trying to be the level they was made me a better player.
It's kind of the way I was with my cousins and everything like that. I didn't have any older siblings, but I had older cousins. And I mean, I remember getting my bell rung and crying, and them not letting me cry. And, they again, that's kind of what we're going to be talking about, is those people that made you who you are today. I got to tell you a quick embarrassing story. I have never shared this with anybody, and it has to do with Byron. We were in practice one day. Of course, you remember what I looked like as a freshman, and you don't have to tell everybody, but as I said, I was way out of place.
A little smaller.
A little smaller. And he ran the tight end hot, and I'm playing defensive back. Well, I come up and I thought I knocked the crap out of him, and he just kept going. And he was one of those likable guys, and so after practice was over, I walked up and I said, "Hey man, I didn't mean to, hit you like that or whatever like that." And I remember the look on his face. It was almost like, I have no idea what you're talking about, and probably didn't even remember that, didn't even feel it. And I have thought about that. I'm like, oh my God, why did I say that? That's so stupid. And but yeah, those guys were big. They were big.
So Byron, I'll tell you a little story. So my first scrimmage at college, you wasn't there then. Byron told me, he said, "Watch out for the backers when you cross the middle." Byron was a tight end. I was a wideout. And I'm just like, I'm thinking high school, I didn't really think much about it. When I woke up, Byron was over me, and he said, "I told you to watch out for those backers." But James Turner caught me with an elbow, and
oh my God, he was a rock. He was a rock. I don't know. So I think it was my sophomore year. It was spring ball, and I think you were hurt, and a lot of y'all got hurt. And Coach Barnes moved me over to receiver, which I did not want to go over there because of that right there. When you play in that secondary, and Wayman Wright, a lot of those guys. I mean, people don't believe when I tell them in practice, it was like a game.
Oh yeah.
You didn't have red shirts and green shirts and all the other stuff. If that receiver came across the middle as defensive backs, we're going to take you out.
Yep.
And so when they put me over on offense, I was like, I don't know that I can catch the ball. I couldn't focus. I couldn't concentrate. Finally, kind of got some rhythm under me, but I was so glad to get back on the defensive side of the ball. I didn't want any of that.
It's a lot better being the hitter instead of hitty.
Well, yeah. I mean, you guys know where you're going, but we can see you going there. I mean, so junior year, we're actually having a scrimmage game, and you ran a deep, and I remember Joey Drennan threw it, and I think y'all were in a twin set to the left, and you ran a deep cross. Well, the tight end didn't go out, and I'm playing on the opposite side, so I start drifting back, and I look over and see you crossing, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna get him, and I start that way. Well, Joey didn't throw it like he should have, and I was able to intercept it. And just remember going back up the sideline thinking, okay, I could have had the hit on Lance, this is better. And then Tony Stitt hit me so hard. I'm like, okay, man, I don't need to run the ball either. I just need to, I need to do different things than that. But I'll leave that to y'all. So tell me about the support of your family in your youth sports. And, you know, I know it's probably not like it is for a lot of us now. As a matter of fact, when I was in the 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, I had to hitchhike back and forth in the summer when we had two-a-days, right? So because I couldn't drive, we didn't have a car, and you know, now you got moms and dads running kids up and down the street, 10, 15 different sports at a time. What was the support like from your family when you got into sports?
So once again, we were 18 miles away from Star City. So my parents had to drive to get me to practice and all, but they were always very supportive. My mom, you know, she would work and come home after a day working at school all day and have supper on the table that night, you know, cook a meal. And so it was that type of home. And, you know, my mother and my father, he worked more so, especially, do you remember they used to have punt, pass, and kick? You remember that? And so I used to do all the punt, pass, and kicks and won a lot of them. Went to a lot of regional, like over in Memphis, and actually went to Dallas one time. So, you know, but my parents was always behind me, and they'd always carry me to them kind of functions. And you know, once Byron and Brandon got where they were old enough, so when I was in junior high, and they was a 10th grader, where they were able to, you know, we'd all ride with them to practice. They could drive then. I couldn't, so that took all the load off Mom and them then. But, you know, on Friday nights or Thursday night, whatever night we played on, they were always there behind us 100%.
Well, and that's one message I hope that we can share with our audience over time is just how much our families do for us to make sure that we're able to chase that dream regardless of whatever level it may be on or whenever it may stop. But there's a lot of work that goes into getting those kids back and forth to practice. And as you said before, you know, we don't think about that at that age that, you know, mom's been out working all day and she's got to come home, cook, clean, all the things, but yet she's still, you know, chauffeuring us around and all the things just to give us a chance to find our dream.
Yeah, we don't realize, we don't appreciate our parents enough till they're gone, and then you look back and then you realize, you know, what they did for you. Absolutely,
100%. You know, I've told people this before that, and I didn't get a lot of playing time early on in my career, even in high school. Most people don't realize this, but I didn't even start as a senior in high school. But I led the team in interceptions, and I led the team in receptions, in yards, and in touchdowns. Now, how do you do that and you're not even a starter? Pretty crazy.
That's pretty impressive.
But the thing is, my mom and dad missed 2 football games the entire time that I played of all the ones that I ever played. One was Sanford in Alabama, and one was in Warrensburg with Central Missouri. Central Missouri. Yep. Yeah. That's the only 2 they ever missed. And, you know, just being that supportive, that means a lot, even if you're standing on the sideline.
You bet. You bet. I mean, you know, and I was fortunate enough, you know, Lendon, I ended up starting as a freshman at UAM. I got hurt in the 4th game of the season against Arkansas Tech. I mean, and you know, if you remember, Coach Tilley sent in plays with the receiver. I think that's the only reason I got to play, because I was not Moses was the starting receiver. You know, I was the second team, but I got to bring in plays. But so I was fortunate to play, you know, as a freshman, and then as a sophomore, got more playing time. I mean, but it was the same way as alternating. And then my parents, they never missed a game. Yeah, never missed a game. My dad, you know, during harvest season, you know, that's our busy time. You got to go. But on Saturdays, he was up in them stands, and you know as well as I do, coming over that sideline, looking up there and seeing your parents in the stand, that means the world.
Yes, it does.
It means the world to you.
It absolutely does. Absolutely does. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about how things changed for you as you got older, the developmental years, middle school, high school, and even college. So everybody stick around, and we will be right back.
Greatness doesn't happen alone. Behind every champion, there's a team. Behind every story we tell, there are partners who believe in what sports can build, like Core Home Fitness for athletes who never clock out. King's Camo and Sportsman's Warehouse for those who train hard and live wild. Real Property Management Focus, where we focus on your real estate investment needs. And Riker Home Services, your trusted partner for expert repairs and lasting peace of mind. A big thank you to these sponsors for fueling the Go Podcast. To learn more and support our partners, visit our website at thegoalpodcast.com and click on our sponsor page. And now, back to the show.
Thank you for sticking around after that commercial. We appreciate the guys and the businesses and companies that sponsor us and make this all possible. Here with Lance Gasaway today. Lance is a friend of mine, teammate of mine from the University of Arkansas at Monticello a million years ago, and also the owner, one of the owners of the 2024 Kentucky Derby Mystic Dan. By the way, I don't have it with me today, but I do have the bobblehead.
Okay,
I got to get that signed at some point. I told my grandson I was going to get that signed for him.
We can do that.
So let's get back into it now. We talked about how sports played a role and your family played a role when you were younger, and you know all that pee-wee and all that's fun. But then as you start getting into middle school and getting to high school, it starts getting a little bit more serious. It's a different game, so to speak. What was your first real team experience as a middle schooler, high schooler, or college? And it doesn't matter which one. The one where you, kind of like what we talked about before we came back from break, the one where you understood the team concept.
So probably when I was eighth grader, my brother was in the ninth grade. And our junior high team, and I didn't get to play much. I was me and Russell Alton. We were, and I'm not bragging, but I would guess you'd say we were probably the two better athletes of the eighth grade at that point. We got to play just a little bit, but very limited. But that junior high team went 8-0-1. It went undefeated, and but you felt part of that. You felt like a big part of it, even though I was on the pine, and but that meant a lot being a part of that.
Awesome. All right. So here's a good one. Who was the first coach that really shaped you? And what do you remember about what they taught you?
Jerry White was he was a high school coach at Star City there. And I guess probably the way he shaped me, he actually never coached me. But the way Coach White was, he would, when I was in the 5th, 6th grade, he was a senior high football coach now, and he would come over to the school, or if he seen you in the lunchroom, and he'd say, pat you on the back, boy, you're going to be a Bulldog one day. Well, he had your head this big, thinking, this guy, he knows who I am. And just that right there had you so motivated to want to be a Star City Bulldog at that point, and so Coach White was a big influence of, not me, but thousands of kids coming through Star City, just getting the kids to come out. Little things like that people don't realize that go a long way to a little kid.
Yeah, they do. I mean, and you're right. It's the personality and it's the character and core of those men and those coaches, and they do that for everybody. It's not, you and I were having a conversation today about Coach Barnes and what he meant to you and what he meant to me, and it's the same. It's really the same. And he didn't pick favorites. He just treated people in a way that let you know he cared about you. And when I was in the 8th grade, we had our head coach was Coach Oliver, and we were in an 8th grade game one night, and he comes out. Our 8th grade and 9th grade played together, so that's small school.
That's the way we was.
Yeah. So he's down on the field. Of course, you know how it is. Everybody's like, oh, there's a head coach. There's the big guy, right? Junior high coach, they're not anything. There's that big guy there. And we're getting ready to go on kickoff team. And I'm telling you, you think I was small in college, you should have seen me in the 8th grade. And he walks up to me and he said, Lendon, if I put you on kickoff team right now, will you run down there and knock I'm not going to say what he said, knock the mess out of somebody? And I'm like, yes, sir. And I go out there on the field. He puts me out there. I hadn't been on the field probably all year long, and I'm like, I got to do something. And I just remember running down the field, and these two guys came together, and all I did was I'm just like, all right, I just sold out, hit them as hard as I could. I knocked them both down. I didn't make a tackle, but that was one of the greatest early opportunities I ever had. And it's how those men impact us that way and get us to do so much. Those are the lessons that we learn, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's go to high school now. So what role did you play in your high school team? Were star, leader, underdog, late bloomer? I couldn't even put mine in there. Mine didn't even register. So
I'm about the same way, Lendon. When I was in the 10th grade, Byron and Brandon were seniors in. So I never forget this. My 10th grade physical, I was 5'6", 132 pounds. Going into the 10th grade. So I was tiny. Mm-hmm. And Byron, then was 190 pounds. So I actually ended up starting. We had as a wideout. And I started for 3 or 4 games. And the coach changed the offense and went to a double tight end. And he put Byron on one side and Brandon on the other as the tight ends, which, hey, what could I say?
Pretty smart.
yeah, I think. And they ended up going to the state playoffs and got beat, right about their last minute play there, beat them. But and then as 11th grader, I went back to 11th grade, and that year when I had my growing spurt, I was 5'10" and like 170 pounds. So made a big move that year, and as 11th grader, I was a pretty instrumental player, I guess you would say, in 11th and 12th grade, and made all the honors, the all district, all southeast, and all that kind of stuff. But
yeah,
it was more team. You have good players around you. You're gonna be better. That's just all it is to it.
It is, and I know how humble you are, Lance. I played with you, and I know how good you are and how good you were, and I respect and appreciate the humbleness. But for those of you watching, Lance was the real deal. Another question: was there a win, loss, or injury, or a setback in your career, high school or junior high, that had an impact on your mindset?
I had so my senior year, we were having our blue-white game, and so we didn't have a whole lot of, small school, Star City. I think we had 45, 50 players out, and not a whole lot of, sure enough, true athletes, I guess you would say. So I was a receiver, I always was. And then coach said, well, hey, you're like one of the faster ones on the team. Let's put you at running back. So first play at running back in the blue-white game, we run an option play, and he pitches me the ball, and I go out, and I'm planting to make a move, and the boy, Danny Watts, never forget, he hits my knee and just hyperextended it. But I missed the first 2 games of the season. And when something like that happens, you worry about missing your senior year and all of that. But, it really drove me to think, hey, you need to get back to what you know how to do and stay there.
Right. Stay in your own lane.
Stay in my own lane, like you're talking about. Hey, I'm not a running back. Let me catch the ball and see what I can do after that, but not in the back.
Yep. There's a lot to be said about that. Yeah. All right, let's move into the college now, the college side of it. That's where you and I met and got to know each other. And I just found this out the other day on your bio. So I know the answer, but we're going to share that with our audience. In college, did you get recruited to play, or did you walk on?
So I walked on. I actually had UCA had offered me like a quarter of a scholarship, basically a walk on there too. But Byron and Brandon and my brother was down at UAM, so that's where I wanted to go. And I walked on there, and never forget, longest day I lived, first depth chart, I was 18th team receiver. 18th team.
Man, I thought I was bad.
Yep. So you're talking about depressing.
I was 8th. I was 8th, and I thought that was a long way down. But here's the thing about it. There was nobody below me. I will say that. I was 8th, but I was the last one. So
hey, you know who one of the receivers was, Lendon? You might remember. Ray Howard. He came as a receiver.
Oh, he did, didn't he?
Yes.
I remember that. Yeah. Oh, Big Ray Howard used to not be so big when he first got there. That's crazy.
That next year after that year, he come back a man.
I remember when he came back, nobody could recognize him.
Yeah.
What was college like for you? Was, coming out of high school and getting into college? I mean, you achieved a lot in high school.
Yeah,
college. I don't know that everybody understands what it's like being a freshman.
Yeah, so as a freshman, when you're going from high school to college, the biggest thing to me is the speed of the game. I mean, you're in the same way going from college to pro. I mean, just about anybody you talk to, they'll say the same thing. The speed of the game, it just steadily gets faster and faster. And in college, they're faster, bigger, stronger than it was in high school. So for me, going to college, it was a big step up from the little school I was at. I was at Little Star City. It wasn't a big school like out of Little Rock, where Markham and them was. And but I guess the big thing that helped me was Byron was there.
Yeah.
And he was, All-American. And I'll tell you the first little story. I ended up starting as a freshman. I come up from 18th team. And only because we alternated. That's the only reason. Moses Goldman taught me a lot and was a better receiver than me at that point. But he taught me a lot and helped me a lot. But I never forget the first game, UAPB. We go up there to play them, and, I mean, they were huge. They had a kid named Michael McInnes. I'll never forget it.
Yep.
6'7", 280 pounds. Pittsburgh Steelers were going to draft him. They was talking about going in the first or second round. And we walk into that daggum gym, and he's just putting a stick on the tetherball pole, hollering, "Weevil meat, weevil meat." I was scared to death. And before I ever went on the field, was wringing wet. And Byron was already an All-American, tight end. And so we're in a pro set, and I'm a wide out, and Byron's a tight end, and he runs a flag. Well, guess what? Everybody in the world goes to Byron. I run a little out route there. Ain't nobody within 20 yards of me. And Singler throws me the ball, and guess what? Goes right through my hands. First pass ever threw to him. That's
nowhere to go but up from there, right?
Nowhere to go but up from there. That's right.
Funny. Man, so I tell you what, that story, though, you are 100% right. It may not have been the same year. I can't remember. You came in a year before me, I think.
Yeah.
But I do remember going to UAPB. And for those of you watching that don't know, UAPB's colors are black and gold. And that day, they looked like the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I'm not talking about just from uniforms. I'm talking about in size and everything. Yes. And they were the most intimidating football team I'd ever seen in my life. Absolutely.
And had the athletes. There's a lot of athletes from UAPB that's made it to the professional level.
Absolutely. Who was it? LC Greenwood?
Yes, LC Greenwood.
He did play for the Steelers.
Yep.
So, let's talk about now transitioning a little bit. Let's see how much time we got. We got about a minute and a half yet. Talk about, and I know you don't want to do this, but I really want you to, talk about some of the awards and achievements that you made while at the University of Arkansas at Monticello. And after that season was over, and season meaning college, did you have an opportunity to play pro? What did that look like?
So, yeah, I was fortunate enough where I made all AIC, was a first team pick, unanimous first team pick 2 years in a row. I led the conference in receiving 2 years in a row. Made honorable mention All-American in AA District 17. And still have some records there. I had a game where I caught 16 passes, and you remember Henderson game, and then as a junior, I set a record catching 13 in a game. So I had some big days, but once again, hey, Joe Don was on, and he put the ball there. I had to catch it. So, and we had a good football team. Lendon, my senior year. Man, we're one play away from. We finished 10th in the nation, and back then they didn't take but 18.
They took the top eight.
Top eight.
When we played UCA, they were first and we were third, and they only beat us 4 points.
4 points at UAM.
Yep,
yes,
at UAM.
And then Henderson beat them, and we beat Henderson.
Mm-hmm.
We messed up against Washita. Washita cost us. We threw a dud up that game, but I look back on that, and you're talking about, was there one game that really, if you could have a do-over, the Washita. I mean, because we or even the UCA. You remember Coach Barnes? Joe Don did not have a strong arm, but Joe Don was probably one of the most accurate quarterbacks I ever played with.
Oh, yeah.
And the first half against UCA, it was an afternoon game, and wind was blowing, so we didn't throw the ball a lot. And then we got behind, and we had to throw it, and we came back and almost beat them. UCA ties for the national championship that year.
Yep. I don't know if you remember this or not, but that UCA game, and I'm not throwing him under the bus, but I think their third play of the game on offense, they hit an out route and scored a touchdown.
Yes.
And from that point on, we outplayed them.
Yes, I remember that.
We couldn't get that next 4 points.
You're right. And but walking away after that, because, on your sheet you said, so were you anxious before that last game, knowing that was your last game? We didn't know that was our last game because we thought we had a chance to make the playoffs. Mm-hmm. We knew we were in contention. We just didn't know how it was going to pan out because we were close to the top 8 in the nation.
Yep.
And so, then once, we didn't make it, reality sets in and, it's over. But I had an opportunity to go professional. So the Baltimore Stars, I had been talking to them. And my father, I got married as a junior, and I had a kid actually my senior year. So my father-in-law was Dowda Womack, and he was good friends with Sporty Carpenter, the head coach at Henderson. And Sporty had actually Jim Brewer. Jim Brewer had got some quotes and all from them and set up me a resume basically to send out to the pro teams. And Sporty had hooked me up with Roy Green's agent and got me a free agent tryout with up in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. So I went to a camp up there, and I had a pretty good camp. I caught 4 or 5 passes in the scrimmage. Willie Totten, which was Jerry Rice's quarterback at Mississippi Valley, was our quarterback, and he had a gun. I'm talking about it. He would cut your hand with the laces. I mean, he had a rocket. But in all honesty, I probably wasn't fast enough. I would have been a possession receiver. And I actually was going to go into the St. Louis Cardinals camp, and they had a receiver. I don't know if you remember him, named Howard Twilley.
Yep.
And he was holding out. And they had said, hey, if he keeps holding out, we're going to bring you in next week. Well, he signed. So I had to sit out a whole year before I could, really go try out. And then when I went and tried out on the second half, I got my knee hit, and it was a cartilage deal. It wasn't nothing major, but I come home and was, depressed. I knew then my career, it was over. You got at some point you got to walk away. And a week later, I don't know if you remember this, but back then the NFL went on strike, and they brought in the replacement players.
Right.
Well, I get a call from Memphis, and they asked me to come try out, and I never had got it was a month later. I never got my knee fixed, so I knew then it just wasn't meant to be.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a hard admission to go. It's over, man.
Yep.
It's
that
hard.
Was tough.
Well, Lance, we're going to take another quick break, and then when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about where that transition now. We're going to get into what you do in your real job now, and how all those lessons along the way in sports, and all those people that invested in you, how those impact the way that you run your businesses today, and how you manage things today. So if everybody will stick around, watch these commercials, and we'll be right back.
Greatness doesn't happen alone. Behind every champion, there's a team. Behind every story we tell, there are partners who believe in what sports can build. Like Core Home Fitness, for athletes who never clock out. King's Camo and Sportsman's Warehouse, for those who train hard and live wild. Real Property Management Focus, where we focus on your real estate investment needs. And Riker Home Services, your trusted partner for expert repairs and lasting peace of mind. A big thank you to these sponsors for fueling the Go Podcast. To learn more and support our partners, visit our website at thegoalpodcast.com and click on our sponsor page. And now back to the show.
All right, we're back. Thank you for sticking around. Thanks to our sponsors for making these type of shows happen. We really appreciate all that they give us and all that they do for us. Here with Lance Gasaway, a longtime friend, college teammate, and one of the owners of the 2024 Kentucky Derby winner, Mystic Dan. We've talked through early childhood sports, middle school, high school, and college. We're moving in now, Lance, into you talked a little bit about your pro tryout and injuries and stuff like that. One of the things that we all, I believe it's pretty prevalent, is that's our identity and how we handle that transition when sports is over. We've been an athlete our whole life. It's been pretty much how we saw ourselves in the future. I think everybody has the same story, but it's all different. When you realized it was over, how did you feel? What did you think? How did you move past? And as you said earlier, we never get over it. But how did you move past and manage it?
So, as I at that point was a father, so I had to move on. I had to, I'm to the point now, hey, I got to feed my family. And so, I always said growing up, I was never going to go back and farm. I mean, because my dad, we worked hard. And I don't begrudge Dad for any of that. I mean, that's the way he was brought up, and that's the way I was brought up. And I think it's probably one of the best things that ever happened to me because it gave me work ethic that I see a lot of these people today do not have.
Right.
And I brought my kids up the same way with, to have that same work ethic. But so when I got out, I decided to come back and farm. And my brother was already back farming. 1980 was the big drought. I don't know. Most people probably don't know that for the farming world, 1980 was a drought. Like in Arkansas, we had over 30 days of 100-degree temperatures. And it devastated the crops. And my dad had got in financial trouble back then. That was my senior year in high school. And so when we came back, it was a struggle because my brother and I actually, our first business transaction was signing a note to help get my dad out of debt. So, back then, we had to put our name on a note for $500,000. And, the way we made it farming back then is, you'd plant wheat in the wintertime and try to plant the crop to get some money just to live on. I mean, it was hard times. We struggled. But, my dad was old school. He had been farming his whole life. We brought in some fresh ideas. My brother, he majored in ag business. I majored in general business. So Greg, he in reality, he knew more about soil fertilization, that kind of stuff than I did, but I was a business guy. I always had a business mind. So, we went, started helping Dad and started making some changes around the farm, and we built our operation up and got out of debt and, made some investments over the years, bought some ground and, worked hard. I mean, I can remember with land leveling, I'd ride the bucket all night long. And then the next day, Greg would run it, but we was trying to get a crop in. So, it was 2 weeks before time to get the crop in. You got to get the field leveled so you don't get your crop in. So, that kind of stuff. I mean, we had work ethic, we worked hard and good things happened and made some business decisions. Was fortunate enough to buy some ground, which, nowadays you can't hardly find no ground to buy. And if you do, it's too high to buy.
Right.
But that's the way we got started. That's the way, Lendon, I kept myself busy. To me, when I got something that's bothering me, sports, football, I had to get it out of my mind. So what I did is I got myself busy. I stayed busy. And for 5 or 6 years, I wouldn't even go to a high school football game. It just bothered me too much to be there. I missed it so much. And then in the mid-90s, around 95 and 94, 95, Happy Grayson was a head coach at Star City, and he called me and asked me if I'd be interested in help, come work with the receivers. That's the way it started. Would you just come work with my receivers? I said, sure. So I go over and work with the receivers, and then I end up being the offensive coordinator for 5 or 6 years, and I'm a volunteer coach over there. So I'm back in football.
Yeah. Well, you can take the boy out of football, but you can't take football out of the boy, right?
That's right. That's right.
Well, talk real quick. I know you mentioned the work ethic, and I know you got that from your dad and your family, and you got that from being a farmer. I mean, you have to have a work ethic, or you're not going to be a farmer very long. What are some other habits and values that you learned in sports that you might not realize you were learning at the time that helped you make that transition and gave you or complemented that work ethic?
So there's two things that I would say, and this is going to sound, I know I've said this 2 or 3 times and it's going to sound redundant, but competitiveness, even as a farmer. So I would, on our farm, the way Greg and I reorganized everything is I raised the rice, Greg raised the cotton, and then we both came in and we split the soybeans, because soybeans are easy to raise, but rice, you got to put a lot of attention on it, cotton you do. So we said, hey, let's just put our individual attention on this instead of all of us doing it all. So guess what? It's a competition to me that this farm over here is rice not going to be better than mine.
Right.
So literally that's what we did. And that's the way I always felt about it. I'm going to be the best rice farmer there is. That's the way I was built. That's and awesome. Then the next aspect of it was surrounding ourselves with good help. You know, you got to have good help. Same way you got to have good teammates. No different. And, once we got our labor situation straightened out and, got set up where I was taking care of the rice, I was putting my attention on the rice, Greg was putting his attention on the cotton. Well, we went from cutting, Daddy used to cut 30 bushel soybeans and 100 bushel rice to where we're cutting 190 bushel rice and, 70 bushel soybeans and these kind of yields. And I remember Daddy, I'll never forget one day, Greg, and this was all Greg, he said, I've been reading about this no-till. He said, we need a tri-field. Because back then you didn't even have no-till. So It's basically in weeds, you go out and plant your crop. And we do that for food plots for deer. Yeah. But I'll never forget Daddy coming by there, and he was so mad. Me, him, and Greg was riding around the truck, and Dad said, I can't believe you boys did that. I've taught y'all better than that. That is embarrassing, blah, 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 blah. Well, a month later, prettiest soybeans in the county. And it was just new technology that it took time for people to realize. And even my dad, at the end, he said, hey, y'all did great. You know what you're doing. And that was the starting point where Dad turned everything over to us. And, hey, y'all know what you're doing. Just another example, we used to finance everything for 5 years. Well, when you're financing $300,000 worth of equipment, that's a lot of interest you're paying. Mm-hmm. So I was a business major, so I started running the numbers like, hey, we can I know it's going to hurt, but let's finance it for 3 years and we can build more equity, pay it off quicker, blah, blah, blah. And so we started making those type changes, and all of it just came together.
Wow. Good stuff. So I know that you're still in farming now. You got a lot of other things going, including horse racing. Talk a little bit about what your businesses are now, what you do, and who do you serve? Okay,
so right now, me and my brother and my 2 boys and Greg's son, we all farm, and we farm about 6,000 acres. Greg and I are on our way out. I mean, in all reality, I'm nothing but an entity on the farm. I get a truck every year. Okay. And on a farm, we do that because of the accelerated depreciation. It's actually a tax break for the farm. Mm-hmm. So we trade trucks every year, and it's just a tax issue. So I'm still involved in the farm to that extent, but I do watch over the boys. I mean, the other day, Sage comes up and, hey, Dad, this rice here's a little yellow. What do you think? And I said, well, you probably need some potassium or, some more urea, to run a petio test. And anyway, just little things he'll call, coming, but they pretty much can handle it now. So other than that, I manage an asset for a group out of Salt Lake City. They're the Cummins estate. I don't know if anybody's familiar with him, but a guy named Ian Cummins. He had bought the whole big farm in Gould. It was like 50,000 acres. And I had managed that for him for 12 years. And then Ian's health got bad and he passed away, and his family had to sell it because he had not had his will set up. And anything that didn't bring in a 10% return, this guy's a billionaire, just to let you know. He's an entrepreneur, billionaire. And so he has like 200 or 300 different companies. So anything that did not make a 10% return, they sold it off. Well, a farm's typically going to bring you 3 to 5% if you don't count the appreciation of the ground, which you really can't count appreciation because it's not happened yet.
Yeah.
So he had to sell the farm. But before they sold the farm, he has a couple guys that works on him, his 2 main guys that look for new businesses. And they had came to me and said, hey, you've been managing the farm. Ian wants to get another kind of business in Arkansas. What can we do? So we got our heads together and decided we put in a ag flying service. And we ended up buying a service that was already in business. We built one in Gould, and then we bought 5 other locations in the surrounding towns. So we have 7 locations, and I manage all of them. We have about right at 40 employees, and we have 9 planes. That's what my main job now. I really don't have to do a lot, just to be quite honest about it. I got 2 people in the office, and we have 2 people in our office, the main office that I work at, and I basically sign checks. But I have a secretary that plots all the jobs, the daily work, and I have a chief financial officer, Neil Cahay, that takes care of the financial aspect of it. And it's an easy gig, just to be honest with you. But I finally got myself surrounded. We went through hiccups because it took me a while to find the right people, and the people I got in place now just makes my job. It's all about, it's not me, it's them. I mean, I'm just being honest. They're the one who makes the business. Yeah. I have good pilots. We've went through different pilots, but Ian's motto always was, we're going to provide them the best service with the best equipment, with the best pilots, and don't worry about nothing else. The business will come. And you think about that, and there's never been a truer story.
That is true. We had a conversation about that today in one of our business luncheons about how to avoid being considered a commodity. And what you just said is that the number one way to do it. Yeah. Best product, best service, and best equipment.
Best equipment. And hey, the rest will take care of itself.
You can eliminate a lot of competition that way.
You bet. You bet you. and we did, by the way, on the way.
I bet you did. Well, Lance, we're going to take our final break real quick, and then when we come back, we're going to finish this up, talk a little bit about all these things you learned and how you implemented those into business. And then we're probably going to talk a little bit about some horses before we go, and then we'll wrap this up. But everybody stick around. We'll be right back.
Greatness doesn't happen alone. Behind every champion, there's a team. Behind every story we tell, there are partners who believe in what sports can build. Like Core Home Fitness, for athletes who never clock out. King's Camo and Sportsman's Warehouse, for those who train hard and live wild. Real Property Management Focus, where we focus on your real estate investment needs. And Riker Home Services, your trusted partner for expert repairs and lasting peace of mind. A big thank you to these sponsors for fueling the Goal Podcast. To learn more and support our partners, visit our website at thegoalpodcast.com and click on our sponsor page. And now back to the show.
All right, we're back. Thank you again to our sponsors for making this possible. Here with Lance Gasaway, and we've been talking about his journey through sports, all the way up from Pee Wee to college, and even opportunity to try out pro. We talked a little bit about a business that he's in now. Lance, I want you to share a little bit more about what we just talked about during break on some of the businesses that you've done. Share with us what you want. And then how did you, when you were looking, I know you've talked a lot about having the right people, and so talk about how important it is and what lessons you learned being on a team when you were coaching on how to put a business team together.
Yeah, well, when you're looking at how you're going to put it together, the main thing is you're going to have somebody that's willing that has the character, number one. Number two, they're going to have to be, if it's a public business, where there's sales or something, they're going to have to be, actually, now this is going to sound bad, but sex appeal sells, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I don't mean this bad, but, you take a pretty girl and put them in a business, and business is going to come. I mean, you can like it or not, but that's the facts of life. You can put a handsome guy in a business to run a business, and people will come.
Mm-hmm.
So, on all of my businesses, I bought like a tanning salon, a blueprint store, a graphic store, and I took them, I reorganized them. I mean, I would look at the numbers on it, and I knew the volume was there, but it just wasn't managed well. So I would reorganize it. I changed the labor on 90% of the businesses I did, and built them up and sold them. And when I sold them, I tried. Some didn't, but most of them I financed it for them. Because most of the time, when you sell a business like that, when you get it built up, I had one business in particular down at Monticello, a little graphics business. When I bought the business, it was doing $65,000 a year. We built it up to $220,000 a year gross revenue. I know that's a small number, but numbers are numbers.
Right.
They're still going to be percentages, okay?
Right.
And they're still going to be EBITDA numbers.
Count. Right.
That's right. So that's what you're looking at, bottom line. And but that particular business, I sold it, and then they ended up turning it back. The girl didn't do good, and they just ended up turning it back. Well, I'm sitting there, got the business, and I've sold it like 3 times, and they still owe me money on the business, and it's done paid for itself like 3 times.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of the way I've done a lot of business. And then I got a little strip mall that, I'm to the point now where I've sold off all my businesses. What I want to do is I want to draw rents off my strip mall, off the land we own. We brought rent, and then I'm cutting back in life, and I put more attention now on horse racing, trying to deal with these horses and following them around and enjoying life. Lendon, I'm 62, so you're 61, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm getting up there, so it's time to slow down.
And it is. So, great segue. Let's talk about horse racing now. So, you're sitting there one day. I'd seen that you'd been at Louisiana Downs. I knew you were into horse racing. All of a sudden, I see something on Facebook that you're going to have a horse running. I missed the whole Arkansas Derby thing, but all of a sudden, you're going to be in the Kentucky Derby, and I'm like, I cannot believe this small town boy from Arkansas has come this far. And I remember back in the day, and maybe I shouldn't say this, but a bunch of us would skip school and head to Hot Springs, and
a lot of days
spend a day at Hot Springs. We would always try to remember to put back then you could buy a lot of gas for $20.
Yeah.
We'd put $20 in the glove box so that if we lost everything, we'd have gas money to get home.
Yeah.
And now this guy is running in the Kentucky Derby. Talk about how you got into horse racing, what you love about it, and just share a little bit of what's going on over the last couple of years.
So when I first got into horse racing, my brother and I and a friend at Hot Springs named Daniel Hamby was literally at a bar across the street from the racetrack at Hot Springs, and had a buddy come up and ask us if we'd be interested in buying 3 Archie bred horses. And in all honesty, we probably had a little bit too much to drink that day, and we did it. And that was my first horse that we had ever bought. And 2 of them never made it to the track. One of them, I think, ran one time. And from there, I was hooked, though. I was hooked on and hooked to the point where I wanted to have a winner. But number 2, here it goes again. That competitiveness coming in me. Well, I can do this. So I go out and claim a horse by myself, $15,000. I'll never forget it. And a month later, the horse runs back and it wins, and everybody's going crazy. And we have like 100 people in the picture at just a $15,000 claiming race at Oaklawn Park. They're like, "What's going on here? Where's all these people?" But it was that's just my drive. I just feel like whatever I do, I got to win it. I never would let my kids win at Monopoly growing up. I mean, I'm just being honest. I mean, I'm just that competitive. Hey, if you beat me, you beat me, but I'm not going to let you.
Hey, I feel the same way. People used to get angry at me because I'd be playing basketball with my son. He's 5 years old, 6, 7, 8, whatever. You know, I'm 5'9", so I'm not tall, but felt like I was Shaq, and I just stuff everything he tried to shoot. And they're like, you're not gonna help his confidence. I said, his confidence will come the day he beats me.
Yeah.
And I remember to this day, he was in the 10th grade, and we're playing, and he beats me 10-0. And I'm like, there you are, young man.
There you go. Yeah.
It took you a minute, but now you know you earned it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great. But so, from there, my dad got involved a little bit, and my brother kind of eased his way out. And Greg has an allergy with the horses that when he goes over to the barn, the hay and all breaks him all out and all. And I think that really is what pushed him away. Mm-hmm. But my dad and I kind of got into him, just he and I. And then in 2020, we actually had a horse named Wells Bayou, mm-hmm. and we won the Louisiana Derby down there at Fairgrounds. And we were number one on the rankings to go to the Kentucky Derby that year. I actually qualified that year. But they moved the Kentucky Derby because of COVID to September, and then he got hurt in the Arkansas Derby, so we didn't get to run. Mm. So then we come back, and Dad and I pick up some horses along the way, and we had a horse named Ma'am that Kenny McPeak trained for us. And after we retired, Kenny, said, "Hey, man, why don't you look at breeding this horse? I think she'll make a good brood mare." So we did, and Dad, at that point, he's a son. He said, "I don't think I want to do that," because Dad was getting older, and he said, I'm too old to wait 3 years for a horse and all that." So he said, "I'm gonna pass on that." So I let my cousins, they got in it, Brent and Sherilyn, and we started breeding Ma'am. And Ma'am's very first baby, guess who it is? Mystic Dan.
Mystic Dan.
And my dad died 1 year to the date of when we won the Kentucky Derby. Mm-hmm. He died on May the 3rd of 2023, and we won the Derby on May the 3rd of 2024. Man. It was like it was meant to be.
Yep. Yep.
So that's kind of how I got in the business, of horse racing. Same thing, I'm just competitive. I go to sales, I look at pedigrees, just lucky, blessed, you got to be very, very lucky to win a Kentucky Derby. There's so many horses.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, everything's got to fall together. There's so many things that can go wrong.
It's got to be perfect. Yep.
Yep, it does. It does. Well, Lance, we're going to start wrapping up here. I mean, it has been, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on and just getting to catch up with you. But before we go, I got a few more questions for you. And some of these, I know what you're going to say, and I'm ready to hear it. What's your take on today's sports culture?
So, in the culture we're in today, there's no loyalty. And, Lendon, when you and I went to college there, we would have died to be there. I walked on.
Yeah. And we paid them to play.
yeah, really. I mean, I would have gave anything just to be out there. Mm-hmm. And what I see going today with these kids, they have no loyalty to the colleges. These coaches I can't even comprehend after what all Coach Barnes did for me. Look at him saying, "Coach, I'm going to go play at UCA next year. They're giving me $1 million." That's not worth it to me. That's just not good. I just can't believe these kids are doing this. I can't believe the NCAA is letting this happen to the level it's happened. I think, here. So you and I talked about this, Lendon, and I'm going to go and throw it out there.
All right.
People's going to probably think I'm crazy, but I personally do not believe there should be a Heisman Trophy. I do not believe football is a one-guy sport. It takes 11 guys on offense and 11 guys on defense, and then another 20 or 30 on the squad, on special teams and practice squads that makes a team. Mm-hmm. And I don't care who you are. You got to have teammates to help you in football. I could never have caught a pass if I wouldn't have had an offensive line, if I wouldn't have had a back picking up that blitzing in, if I wouldn't have had a receiver running a complimentary route, if I wouldn't have had secondaries that worked me over in practice. It's all a team deal.
Yeah.
So if we're going to do the portal, if we're going to do this NIL, if we're going to give $1 million to the quarterback, why not give it to the team?
I agree.
Because I think we're bringing this division into our teams. You can't tell me that a player over here is not sitting there saying, well, why is he getting $1 million? And if I don't take this back, if I don't protect his backside, I ain't getting, and I still ain't getting nothing. He wouldn't be nothing without me protecting his backside.
Yeah.
That's just not right. I think we've got to look at this, or we're going to ruin college sports.
I agree. 100% I do. And I think it's going to go, and that's the reason why we want to do this podcast. I think it's going to go further than just college sports. I think it's going to continue to deteriorate our culture beyond sports. Imagine the mentality of some of these athletes that are all about the NIL, they're all about the transfer portal. Is that the person you want to hire? You know, maybe you never get a chance to hire them. Maybe they go pro and they've got billions of dollars and you never get a chance to hire them. But it's not the guy I want to hire. I don't want to hire the guy that, oh, this guy's going to pay me $100 more. I'm gonna quit and go work for him, or I'm just going to job hop all the time. You can't build those teams that you've been successful in growing your business with that mentality. And that's why we want to have these conversations, because the way sports used to be, and I know we sound like two old guys sitting around talking about the way it used to be, but the way it used to be built character, it built integrity, resilience, determination, all those things. And discipline. And I'm scared of what this is going to look like 10, 15 years down the road when these guys have that revelation that day that you and I had to have, that I can't play sports anymore. Now I got to go work. I got to go serve the world. And I'm not sure they're going to know how to do that.
Well, I agree with you 100%. I think they're running the younger generation. They're not going to understand loyalty. They're never going to, their work ethic's not there. You hear it all the time now. They're saying, well, why can't we just work 4 days a week? Why? Man, I used to work 7 days a week. Why don't we do that? You want to work 4 days a week? Why don't we want to work 6 days a week then?
Yeah.
But there's a saying that a coach told me once, and I want you to think about this, and everybody out there. You put yourself in a position as a coach, as a business person, or whatever you're at. And I'll never forget the coach told me, he looked at me, he said, you know what? And before that, he kicked this kid off the team. He kicked this kid off the team that I'm telling you, we would have won a state championship if we'd have had that kid. He was a dominating running back, dominating. But he kicked him off, and Happy looked at me and he said, you know what? He said, I'd rather have a kid I'd rather have a kid with no talent and all heart any day of the week than a kid with all the talent in the world and no heart.
Mm-hmm.
You think about that.
Oh, yeah.
And nothing has ever really resonated to me more than that right there. And I've seen it through life. I've seen it in college athletics, high school athletics. You take these kids that think that, hey, it's me, it's all about me. No, it ain't. No, it ain't. You got to have that loyalty. You got to have that heart. You got to have that desire. You got to have that discipline. And if you don't got it, man, you got a long road ahead of you.
I agree. My next question is funny. I was going to say, if you could speak to every parent of a young athlete, what's one thing you'd tell them? And I think you just told them right there. I think I don't think you can say anything better. 2 more questions, and then we're going to wrap it up. If your 12-year-old self could meet you today, what do you hope that 12-year-old would say?
I think he would. My parents taught me good, and my parents were disciplined. I mean, don't get me wrong. We were all kids, and we were all kids through our high school, college days, and we all did some things we shouldn't have done. But I think a 12-year-old me looking at me today, he would say, you know what, you turned out pretty good. And I mean, I'm not perfect by any means, but, I know I do an honest day work, and we try hard, and me and my brother, we worked hard, worked for everything we got, and I think that's just something to be proud of.
Well, that wasn't scripted, but it was perfect for us the way I want to end the show today, because I think that's really what the goal is about, is how we turn out, right? And all those people that impacted us along the way, from the first time we even knew what a football was, or a baseball, or a basketball, or whatever it may be, and all those people that impacted our lives, Coach Barnes and different ones like that. That's the message we hope that we're getting out to people, and that people and friends like Lance can bring to this show, is to show that this journey that was carried a lot by sports, and the people that were involved, and the people that supported us, and the people that helped us get where we are. I hope they all look back, Coach Barnes and all of them, and they could, and I'm pretty sure they could all of them say, they turned out okay.
Yep.
They did. They turned out okay, and I guess, Lance, that's really all we can hope for.
Yeah.
For anybody. As you said, we're all going to be kids. We're going to be crazy college kids. We're going to do the thing, and sometimes we're going to make the right choice, and sometimes we're not. But it's where we come back to. It's that baseline that we come back to, that our parents taught us, our coaches taught us, that sports taught us, that our teammates held us accountable to, that made us who we are today.
Yep. And I definitely believe, like you're talking about, Coach Barnes, them kind of people, they look back and say, we helped mold a fine gentleman.
Yep. And that's what they were all about. It was way more in sports. We didn't get it at the time.
That's right.
We didn't understand that it was more than just winning that next game. It was, they cared about who we were going to turn out to be.
That's right.
And I think that for me, and this is something I hope that sports doesn't lose, but as we grow, and we owe them for what they did for us. And
Absolutely.
We owe them to be able to bring that to this world now as well. Lance, thank you so much for joining us today, for being here, for sharing your story. Thank you personally for just giving me an hour of your time to catch up. I miss you, buddy. We had some good times together.
We did.
And it's good that we can still remember and reminisce, because them days are gone now.
Yeah, they sure have. And I'll tell you what, you remember Russell Alton?
Yep.
A buddy of mine, he told me the other day, and it's something we got to think about, brother. He said, you know what? We're on a quarter tank. I said, what? He said, we're on a quarter tank. And I said, you got a point there.
Yes.
So, hey.
There ain't a gas station in sight, is it?
Man, it was great catching up with you. I mean, it's been a long time, and I'm sorry that it took us so long to get hooked up, but I really enjoyed visiting with you.
All right. Well, I enjoyed visiting with you too, and thank you so much. And we'll see everybody again in our next one. We should have one coming up in another week. And I want to thank everybody that supports the Gold Podcast, what we're all about, what our mission is, what we're trying to accomplish. Coaches, parents, show this to your kid. Let them know what's ahead of them, what those opportunities are, and where the value is going to be. So until next time, we'll see you guys later.